Welcome to the Mind Money Spectrum podcast, where your hosts, Aaron Ogti and Trishul Patel, go beyond traditional finance questions to help you explore how to use your money to achieve the freedom you want in life.
Hi, my name is Aaron Ogti. I'm a financial advisor in the Bay Area, and I'm here with Trishul Patel, a wealth manager on the East Coast.
Hey, Aaron, great to be here today, and thanks everybody for listening and watching.
Great to be here as well. I just before we get to the thing, I feel like I'm dressed like someone in the Bay Area in winter, and you're dressed like someone in Florida in the winter. So, all right, just first I made that observation, but going back a few episodes, we were talking about our ideal day week year, and this was a Kinder life planning exercise that we were trying to apply to ourselves to kind of give you an idea of some of the ways we think about helping our clients. And we realized that our perspectives are very different because we are small business owners. We can structure our calendar however we want, and that gives us certain freedoms and flexibilities. So we intended to address that difference between entrepreneurs and W-2 employees. And we kind of got distracted about the education system and how it seems like the default in the US is preparing everyone to be a W-2 employee. And we didn't actually get into too many of the mechanics or the differences between W-2 employees working for another company and entrepreneurs. And I don't necessarily want to focus on that entrepreneur idea, in part because of the way tech has played out over the last few decades. Sometimes people think of entrepreneurs, they're thinking like a startup that is going to get venture capital funding and try to go public at some point. And I really tend to mean more on the small business owner side, where they're responsible for kind of generating the revenue of the business, and they do their thing. And so they might have employees, they might not, but it's just trying to distinguish. It's not necessarily building something really big. It's just the lifestyle differences that W-2 employees employees of other organizations have responsibilities and small business owners don't. So I think that's kind of what I think of when I try to think of those differences. And I hope or wonder if we'll be able to get back to relating some of that ideal day, week, year stuff to how W-2 employees could implement some of that idea, especially relating conversations that we've had with clients. But we don't know if we'll have time. We'll see where we go. So starting off with that idea, maybe not entrepreneur, but just that employee versus small business owner. What are some of the things that you were thinking of? Again, it's kind of distinct, you having a great ideal day, week, year for you, but not all W-2 employees who have a regular schedule can do. I guess that's actually one of the things to talk about. Not everyone has a 9-to-5 job. There are some non-traditional work time frames that are still W-2 employees. So what's there that you want to get started with, of the difference between employee versus small business owner?
Well, I think I would broaden that distinction of small business owner to include an umbrella category of individuals that are essentially self-employed, meaning you're not. Yeah, right. So you're not necessarily a small business owner in the traditional sense where you have a shop and people come in and go. You could just be a 1099 worker who is freelancing and doing some sort of side hustle, something like that. It's less formal than a small business with a sign and, come meet me. In fact, you could be working for the same employer as a 1099 versus a W-2, meaning the job can be very similar in nature, but there's certain subtle differences to think about, which is what we'll kind of get into.
Okay, I love this because I'm already thinking of like another example where even within the financial advisory space, there are a large number of jobs for financial advisors where they are W-2 employees of a larger organization, but because they are responsible for generating revenue, that they're on the business development side and serving clients, they have the control of their schedule in the same way that a self-employed or small business owner might be, even though they're also W-2 employees. They still get a payout structure. And so I think that might be one of the distinctions we're trying to get to. And I've seen others that are in sales that if they kind of produce enough results to satisfy whatever their job expectations are, they're given a lot of flexibility in terms of their hours, I guess I'd say. I've seen it with engineers that if they are producing well enough that the boss doesn't necessarily care what time they work. And I know some, like, they'll work from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. and then again from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. And like, so it is like, there's a really good, like, is our emphasis more on time flexibility, or is there something else that might be worth addressing?
Right. So I think maybe we just start with a few definitions to help carve out some of these things, and then we can navigate the landscape that way. So for example, in the traditional sense, a W-2 employee is somebody who has a regular position where somebody tells them, where they're supposed to show up on a regular basis. They have a set number of hours in terms of obligation, and it comes with benefits. So the notion behind the whole W-2 and creation is that you want to have some sort of system that allows individuals to make a commitment to work for a business, but also, given that they've made that commitment, they get certain obligations from the business that provide a sense of stability. And that's where these types of benefits come into play, meaning the business helps them handle their healthcare and their retirement plan and their time off, vacation days. And, these days you can see kind of Cadillac plans for W-2 employees that include legal assistance and childcare and, all cafeteria plans and all the different things that you can kind of think of to make that employee stable in his position so that he can focus on the job. And, that probably grew out of a desire for stability, where in the past, before this concept was common, you basically had everybody for themselves. And if an employer wanted people to work for them, they'd pull them in, and they could potentially, just let them go without certain obligations, or they could shift the character of the work without certain constraints and things like that. And also, when you're committed to an employer, there might be certain things that you need to get figured out that are just challenging to do if you're relocating to a different state or to even a different part of the country, where the employer can help streamline the process. So there's certain mutual benefits that might come from that type of understanding. On the flip side, in the traditional sense today, one common distinction you have between W-2 is this notion of a 1099 employee. So the distinction there is there's actually a distinction from the tax code on how you are taxed, and then a distinction on how these two entities are regulated, or these two different types of employment situations are regulated. The W-2 I mentioned has all those benefits and things that come with it. The 1099, this kind of includes freelance workers, right? Contract jobs, where the employment situation isn't as structured as a W-2, but it also allows individual to be more entrepreneurial, as we started this conversation with. And they might even have a business where their job is to consult for many different companies, so they're not tied to one specific employer. And then from the tax perspective, there is some subtle differences. I have an article that I could share that kind of breaks down that. So I just quickly Googled it. Let me share the screen here. Let's see.
So I don't, this might be like an oversimplification, but I want to like hear your thought. Like, it almost sounds like, who is your boss kind of feeling.
Yeah, that is kind of a good part of it. And here's where it might come into play. So let's see. The quick paragraph here is, let's see. 1099 worker, self-employed, independent contractor, freelancer, or gig worker. So firms may coordinate it with these people to do a specific task, and is defined by like a contract saying, I want you to handle this part of my business for 3 or 4 hours a month, and I'll pay you X. And that's your only association with my business. I pay you money, you do this thing. You do whatever you need to do with your situation, and I'll handle my business. So there's kind of like an arm's length relationship that's going on there. What is a 1099 worker? Well, you're not on the company's payroll. You pay your own taxes, typically on a quarterly basis. You are, again, an independent contractor, freelancer, gig worker. You're not eligible for unemployment. If the business that you're working for decides to let you go, that's kind of it. So this is, again, one of those benefits that you would give up if you end up as a 1099 worker.
Okay.
So why would a business want to hire a 1099 worker? Well, they might bring a specific core set of skills that you may not need on a full-time basis. You can have short-term contracts, come like once a year to do my accounting, something like that. It also has less overhead because, again, it doesn't come with the full benefits of an in-house employee. So that could be a benefit of not having a 1099 worker. Incidentally, the government also realizes that in certain situations, an employer may try to pursue 1099 relationships when, in fact, that person is working in a W-2 capacity. However, the employer is resisting that label because the employer doesn't want to hand over all of those benefits. So there are certain tests
of employment laws, and like once you get to a certain size, if you have over 100 employees, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
So the government watches out for those concerns, and there's regulations in place to say, hey, you're actually showing up for 40 hours a week at the same time. You're in a cubicle. You're doing a lot of stuff that looks like an employee. It seems like you deserve benefits at this point, right? Is what the government is trying to say. So there's some disadvantage of having a 1099 worker as well. You have less control over that person, right? They're not fully tied to your business. Again, you just hired them to do certain jobs.
Yeah.
You don't have the protection of workers' compensation, so you don't have to provide health benefits and stuff like that. But if a 1099 worker injures themselves on the job, they could still hold your business responsible. So there is some liability concern there. And there's legal considerations. You might be able to fire an employee at will, but a contractor, well, that's actually based on the contract that you have with that independent contractor. For example, when you have a W-2 position, it's still an at-will employment, meaning either party can leave, or pass people on for whatever reason if it has a sound business sense. Obviously, you can't discriminate and you can't run afoul of that, but it's essentially a notion of at-will employment. Both parties are agreeing to work with each other, even though it is in a W-2 capacity. However, with a 1099, if that person that you hire doesn't live up to the terms of the contract, meaning they don't deliver, they can be legally responsible, meaning the 1099 person said they're going to provide you with a product. They have to provide you with that product or they would be legally responsible. However, if you hired somebody to do that product for you and they don't do it, you can't say you got to get that done if they're a W-2 employee. You imagine that there is a difference there from that standpoint.
Okay, so this is good in terms of like really understanding the mechanics where it is possible that if you're a 1099 contractor, but there's an expectation for the contract, like we need you to do 120 hours of work over the next 3 weeks. Like that's 40 hours a week. So it's like, or we need you to do 40 hours a week for 3 months. So it's like, there is that time expectation. We need you to come into our office and help do this one thing over here for 40 hours a week for 3 months. And so there are times where the contract work can feel employee-like. And I think the reason I use that example is I'm going to say the 3-month time frame is kind of the key part. It was like, we're going to have you do this one thing over here for 40 hours a week for the next year or two. That probably sounds more like an employee, and then there's employment law involved. But like just for 3 months, it's like that. I don't know enough about employment law as a time frame distinction, but I think that would be a good example of a 1099 work that will feel like an employee. And like some of the other examples, like there could be W-2 employees that don't have those time constraints that can feel like independent work. It I don't say independent contract, but close. Like if you're responsible for business development in some regard, then you're given certain kind of freedoms and flexibility, assuming you're producing up to expectations. And so I think that's probably what the key of what we're trying to talk about. Like there are mechanical differences, and understanding them does make a difference. Like one of the more common benefits, and not just health insurance, but 1099 contractors can't participate in a 401k. If a company has a 401k, that's for employees only. In my business, things like incentive stock options cannot be awarded to contractors, can only be awarded to W-2 employees. So that's like a one super specific thing that does come up in some of the clients and people that I talk to. So there are mechanical differences, and I'm trying to think like but I guess there's also emotional differences. I guess I'm trying to think like a good way to phrase that. The intangible side of expectations,
psychological differences, I guess.
Yeah. And so, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think that is a good part of it. Like why the W-2 structure was put in place initially, to provide this sense of security that employers or employees, I think, didn't have, some sort of safety net from employers kind of abusing their standing, and things like that.
And I think that idea of that expectation is probably a big difference. Like when a company's hiring a W-2 employee, the expectation is they'll be there for a long time to help that company grow. And it's possible the role changes as the company grows. That it's possible that there's either opportunities for advancements or there's new projects, but there's this intent of like a mutual alignment of like we both want the company to grow, so that I have that long-term stable employment that grows either with inflation or promotions, and business owners, whether it's privately held or a public traded company, the stock price in this case would also grow as well. And so there's that mutual alignment on a long-term expectation basis. I don't think that would apply to a contract work. I think that's but I think it does apply to the W-2 employees that have that time flexibility, I guess I say. Does that sound fair? I'm trying to think of any other like counter examples of W-2 employees that either don't have the structure, but they still have that long-term alignment, or they have like misaligned incentives. I'm trying to think of other counter examples.
Yeah.
Where contract work, it's like the contractor doesn't care if the company grows because I'm gone in 3 months anyways, or I'm only doing this one thing anyways, and they're paying me for my time.
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, one of those things. It's a spectrum, right? And some things are going to be very clear, but there's going to be many cases where things feel like one, but could be the other. And I'm sure there's plenty of examples. You did mention, for example, if you're in a more sales type of role or more commissions type of role, you may not even have to show up to a job, right? As long as you hit your numbers, no matter how you do it, that might be all that matters. However, from the standpoint of the business, you're their employee. They control your salary and your base, at least, and then the performance and your growth within the firm is also tied to how well you do. And the notion is it's a long-term relationship. One of the key distinctions, as we both alluded to, is typically W-2 is considered more of a full-time notion, whereas the self-employment or independent contractor or 1099 could be more of a part-time, or many part-times, summed together is your employment situation. So that could all end up being there. I'll just share another bullet point or two, from that same article. Let me kind of throw it up there. So for a W-2 worker, as we mentioned, you are on the payroll. Your taxes are withheld from you versus you having to pay them like quarterly. Yeah. So, just logistically, there's a difference there. Again, it's more full-time in nature, and you're eligible for unemployment. So unemployment programs were set up primarily to protect full-time workers who are tying themselves to a business, realizing that if that business goes under, then or they need to get laid off for certain reasons, some sort of safety net would be sensible. So basically, from your paycheck, you pay into you pay a certain amount each month or per pay period into unemployment as an insurance type of program, typically run by the state. And then again, if you end up in an unemployed situation that qualifies, then you receive funds to help subsidize your living situation until you can regain employment elsewhere.
I just feel like that might be one of the key distinctions that the eligible for unemployment and not eligible for unemployment. Like when I think of W-2 employee and like long-term secure employment, I was influenced by something that I believe Alan Moore from XYPN had said of when you have a job, like one person or company is in charge of 100% of your income. So you can go from 100% to zero. And if you start your own business, if I lose a client, whether it's kind of bad work, they just move on, I still have the rest of my clients. So like there's some like fluctuations, but as long as I'm doing a good job, I don't have as much risk to my income. But I think that difference is when I started, I wasn't eligible for unemployment. Like I was getting nothing for a while. But the full-time employees, the W-2 employees, if they start and they get laid off, they have that unemployment. It's not going from 100 to 0. It is that safety net idea that gives them time to find their next job. And I had not thought of unemployment as like a key part of being a W-2 employee, but that might be one of those big distinctions. Is that does give you that bridge to go from one job to the next without kind of being too on your own.
Well, okay, so I guess we put enough out there for me to climb on a soapbox for a little bit.
Okay.
So My high level take between the two options, being self-employed versus W-2, is I think the W-2, the sacrifice is convenience of having to work things out on your own, right? So with the W-2, you get all of these things spelled out for you and decided for you. Whereas with a 1099 or self-employment situation, you have to figure them out on their own. I think that's the main benefit. Frankly, all the other benefits, I think, are tied to that notion. For example, you often think that it's great with a W-2 in situation that you get all these benefits, but that's technically your compensation package for money that should be coming to you anyway, right?
Yeah.
So if you're working as a W-2 employee and you're getting 60,000 as a base and another 30,000 in benefits, your market price is 90,000. Meaning, if you're self-employed, that's how much roughly. We'll talk to the side, the small nuances, but that's roughly what you should command if you're self-employed, 90,000. But the difference is you need to figure out those benefits from that 90,000 yourself. And I think that's true in all the cases. For example, W-2, you get your insurance figured out through your employer. The benefit there is the employer gets to sign up for a group plan, so they get to come up with a plan with many individuals in the firm to hopefully get a better competitive rate than they would otherwise. I happen to think that's a regulatory capture issue where insurance companies love that it works that way and that you are tied to your employer. But I think it produces the most inefficient healthcare system on the planet, which we've talked about at length. So I don't think it's a great benefit, but it does hurt the independent contractor or self-employed individual who needs to go out on their own to shop around for insurance because he doesn't have a large pool to compete on price. Unfortunately, that's a regulation issue in my mind. The system isn't set up properly to allow for that, but I think that's just the facts of the matter. Other things like the unemployment insurance that you just mentioned, yes, you could pay into the unemployment insurance program, which you are required to do when you're an employee with a W-2 position. However, you could self-insure for the same types of issues that could come up if you are self-employed, meaning you could put away a certain amount. You could buy some sort of even policy, I bet, to handle that type of situation. So I don't think any of the benefits that you get as a W-2 employer couldn't be gotten otherwise, but it's going to take more work to figure out.
Now that you say that, this is like, I have to check with my CPA and I'm not and or the payroll. I'm not sure. But I have an LLC. I actually do pay myself a salary, because part of the rules of LLC, I have to pay myself, the employee, a reasonable salary for the work that I do. From that salary, Social Security, payroll taxes, and I haven't actually checked my own paycheck or my own pay stub. It's possible that part of my income is contributing to unemployment insurance.
Possibly. And what I'd also say is there are de minimis requirements if we're needing to do that, but you can look into that. What I'd say is
real quick. You go ahead.
That's fine. I'll continue pontificating for a bit. But the notion is, with unemployment insurance specifically, it's not a panacea of if anything goes wrong with your employment situation, you get it. There are and depending on the state you live in, the restrictions can be pretty heavy. And the amount that you can get, depending on your income level, may not be nearly enough to cover what you would like. And it doesn't last forever either. Now, I know a lot of these rules were changed over COVID, but that this was basically the government stepping in to subsidize state-run unemployment programs. However, the next time around, it could be vastly different. My certain concern with state-run insurance programs is you're paying into a system that's going to have its own overhead, as with any insurance program. So the amount that you get out of it may not be anywhere near the amount that you put in over your lifetime. So self-insuring in that type of situation, if you have an emergency fund, that's kind of what that's for, right? That's your unemployment insurance for when things happen, especially if unemployment insurance doesn't cover that situation.
Okay, so you know what? I don't actually know where I am paying into California SDI, but I think that's the state disability insurance.
Yeah, right. So disability, right? All of these other benefits that you could get, this is stuff that you could potentially get on your own. Some of these things, as I mentioned, unfortunately, the way the insurance programs are set up, it's harder to do as a self-employed individual. Again, I think that's just a regulation issue that the US isn't looking forward to overcoming anytime soon.
So I think, I'm not an employment lawyer, or regulator, Greystone, the employer, does pay into the California State Unemployment Insurance Program.
Okay.
So the employer pays the unemployment insurance premiums like via that little tax.
Yeah.
So I think for the level I'm paying myself as a salary, I am contributing to unemployment insurance. So I am eligible based on that salary.
Yeah. I'll make another nuanced distinction. A lot of these benefits, there is a difference between the W-2 and 1099 on who pays, the employer or the employee.
Yeah.
My point here as well is, in the end, the employee pays for everything because it's out of his compensation.
Out of the market compensation. Yeah.
It's all fungible, meaning if the employer is paying $10,000 on benefits on your behalf, that's out of the total package that the employer assigned to your situation. Just because it goes from his paycheck instead of from your paycheck is semantics in my mind. So it's not like you get free money for a benefit.
Our example is that exact example. Like, I have my business revenue, the business paying the unemployment rate versus my personal W-2 salary paying that doesn't matter for me because I'm the only employee of this business.
Right. Yeah. And there's subtle distinctions between how a benefit gets paid from a tax purpose, right? Who gets to claim the deduction, so that can make a difference. However, the two things: when you're self-employed, you get more flexibility in that distinction, right? And also, when you're the employer, you get more flexibility in that distinction, so that when you provide the benefits, that benefit gets deducted as an expense on your business income rather than on the, so that there's many things that you can play around with that distinction. But again, at the end of the day, I think all of this just ends up being the compensation that's earmarked for this individual. So it's not like it's a free lunch either way.
Okay. So I completely agree. I'm going to take this in a totally different direction. Because when I was thinking about this W-2 versus self-employed idea, when I talked about that psychological expectation thing, one of the first things that came to mind was some of the work I do with SCI. And this has gone back for more than a decade. And the work I did as an employee at my prior firm and the employees at SCI that I worked with, I would have a question on the investment, something I needed an answer. I would email the contact at SCI because they're on the East Coast. A lot of times they get back to me the next day and okay, based on what they answered, okay, here's my next question, and I get back the next day. So it's like a 2 to 4 day turnaround to try and figure this thing out. If a client asked me a question, or the advisors, my bosses at my prior firm asked me a question, not only would I figure out the answer to that specific question, but I would anticipate what their next question is going to be based on that answer. And I would look up that and prepare that answer as well. And so as I said, it's like a psychological feel, I'm going above and beyond just the question asked to try to do the better job for the overall situation. Both boss and client are happier. And that's a super tiny example of that go above and beyond kind of thing. And I think that is that like psychological, like maybe like it would be like kind of the ambition, but it's that idea of having the mindset beyond just the contract, or like beyond the task of you're a W-2 employee, you are paid to do this one thing. And there's a wide variety of people who may happen to be paid as W-2 employees, but they show that they are going to be thinking more entrepreneurially, thinking for the growth of the business, and they have that mindset. And so they kind of earn that time flexibility. They earn those freedoms. And like, at the end of the day, like, you don't need to be an actual self-employed person to get all the benefits of self-employed person. You could be a W-2 employee, but it's more that like that ambition and mindset, and like again that like psychological expectation. Like I was not aware of like the mechanics of starting a business, starting an LLC. I had to look that up and figure it out. But again, like you said, it was all the other stuff, like having that mindset of figuring it out versus, oh, someone else is going to take care of like my health insurance, my 401k, my disability insurance. All I got to do is sign here and they'll take care of it. Oh man, that is so easy. Why is it ever going to do this? Like, I think there's something there. Like
yeah.
it's so fun. Like, do you have the mindset that you're going to figure it out for yourself?
Yeah, and this comes back to our initial conversation that probably led us down this path. But the notion of, being more intrinsically motivated to figure things out, or extrinsically motivated to follow what's been told to you and meeting, check boxes so that you advance on your next review or you get the bonus at the end of the year, right? And even in the W-2 situation where you noted that you can have a mindset of being more self-employed, I think that does occur in many cases when an employee is incentivized with options, right? And percentages and points and partnership, right? The notion is you're giving an employee the motivation to think like an employer. That's why you're giving them the options. You want them to think of the best interests of the company as well as the best interests of their personal situation, realizing by doing that, you can probably grow the pie better. If somebody who's thinking about the next question, is incentivized by the business growing, then they'll more likely do that. And I think, yep.
I have a slight pushback. I think that the person who's thinking about the next question, they are intrinsically motivated, that they'll probably do the work. But if the employer can't provide that incentive-based system of growth and or promotion, they'll leave the company for another employer who will. Mm-hmm. And so I think the employee will still do the good work, but if the employer wants to keep that good worker, they have to provide those growth opportunities.
Or the employee will freelance, right? They'll find something where they can leverage that capability on their own.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say market forces will help take care of that.
Yes. And so like the thing I think I wrote down here, like again, like the psychology I think is going to be amazing, but I can imagine that when a W-2 worker who clocks in, clocks out, they do a good job, they're happy with their work, when they leave at the end of the day, they don't think about work. And that is freeing and calming and has a lot of psychological benefits, that there's less stress, there's kind of less concern, they get to do the things they like with their free time. But those that are like growth oriented and have that mindset, whether self-employed or W-2 employees, they're thinking about the problems at work the next day during their off time.
Yeah.
And it's like, I would not, again, I'd be curious to see a little more research on like the psychology of that. Like, I know people who do a really good job, and when they clock out, they don't worry about what's going on. Mm-hmm. And they don't, like, they're not being paid to think about it in their off time. So they live a happy life. They get to do the things they enjoy. They don't have to worry about figuring out health insurance and saving in 401k. Like a lot of that stuff's taken care of. They do a good job. They're happy. They have plenty of time for their hobbies. They like the structure that is like calming to them. They don't have to deal with ups and downs of different business cycles. They do a good job and they're happy, and they're a W-2 employee with like they can't take a random Tuesday off to go hiking in the woods, or they can because they have vacation days. Like I'm going to take next Tuesday off, and that's one of my 3 weeks of vacation. That's one of my 21 days of vacation.
Yeah.
So
I think it's interesting because there can certainly be situations where there's a level of unintended consequences such that it feels the exact opposite. For example, I've seen many situations where, in my career, even frankly, where we're all W-2 workers, we're all working more than 40 hours, 50, 60 is, it says in the contract 40, but we may require you to work nights and weekends on an as needed, probably every day basis, right? Oh, you have unlimited vacations, but nobody takes any, right? So,
okay.
So that it's interesting because these benefits, right? Quote, air quotes, or I can even do that, are put in place to provide that notion of flexibility. But many times, if you have a W-2 employee and you have a 1099 worker and you have 80 hours of work and you have 2 people, you might as well give 60 to the W-2 because 20 of that you don't have to pay for, right?
So, okay. I think there's a good Twitter I follow. I think I might get the name of it. I think it's like F It I Quit. And it's just kind of like pointing out the ways that there's a lot of bad employers in our country.
Yeah.
I think this is why at-will employment goes both ways.
Yeah.
That if you're a bad employer, you're gonna have trouble keeping the good employees. It's like if you keep giving them all 60 hours, like why would you work there? Like now maybe they're paying you well enough.
Yeah.
So like, okay, so that's the choice the business is making. But if there's another employer next door down the street that will pay them the same or even a little bit less, but treat their employees well, they'll start losing employees to those other good employers. So like there is a little bit of market at work, but I do think that there are again, I think it's almost like psychological. Like it's the employees who will not put up with it, like, and they'll just leave for the other job.
Yeah.
But I guess that's why employment law and regulations exist, because
it is at will, right? And it's a free country. You're not tied down. I think it may be also industry specific, like hedge fund industry. You're just signing up for it, and you know what you're getting into. You're gonna have to work long, hard hours, and it's gonna take a commitment that's far beyond what it says in the black and white, and you'll be compensated for it, right? That's all part of the nudge, nudge, wink, wink type of arrangement. But in my mind, what kind of bugged me about that type of situation is, again, you're also beholden to the assortment of benefits that get thrown on your plate that may not make sense for your situation. Often when you join a larger company and you're young, yes, you get a group health care plan, but you're a young, healthy person. You're basically subsidizing the older people in the company. So that's not actually a benefit you'd sign up for if you had the choice. There's also many types of benefits that you just don't care about. Why does a 22-year-old with no dependents need a $500,000 life insurance policy, through their employer? So that there's many things where that's money that you would not spend on your own and put the effort into paying out on, but it's coming out of your pocket, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
When it comes to the 401k plan, I remember when I my first job out of school, the company was a small business. I've only worked for small businesses. They didn't have a 401k plan. They finally got one in, like in my second year. They come in, they pitch the plan, and I saw it was all actively managed funds with high fees. And they said they had an open architecture. As they were leaving, I held up my hand. I'm like, where's the index funds? Like,
Yeah.
can't I invest in like an S&P index? And they're like, oh yeah, sure. We have an open architecture. We can do whatever you want. And they left and disappeared for about 6 months. I kept on them, month after month saying, all right, let's get this on the platform. Let's get this on.
Yeah.
I had to bug them for at least 6 months after I resigned to get them on the platform, just because I didn't want to give it up for the people who were still there.
That's the mindset thing. That's like, you are no longer there. You can roll over your 401k to an IRA and invest in those index funds, but you still like wanted to get the problem fixed.
Yeah, but my point is, the employees there, it was a financial services company, but we were building software for banks, not really investment related. Nobody else would have probably even brought up the issue that whole time. And all of a sudden you have 100, 50 to 100 people in a substandard plan, in my opinion, where they could have been doing far better, but now they're beholden to the employer who chose that plan. Why did the employer choose that plan? Because by choosing a plan with high fees, the employer expenses are lower. That's how it works.
It was passing the cost to the employees where
exactly. And it's
for the business, and it's into the expense ratios. Yeah.
Yeah, and here's a situation where the employee would gladly save 1,000 to pass on 10,000 to, right? Why not? Because they can, and it happens all the time. This is a little pet peeve of mine because I've seen it way too many times in the past. Even at the hedge fund, the HR department went out and found their own 401k plan provider, and I raised my hand again. I'm like, where is it? And the moment I did that, the CEO looked at me and realized what I was doing. And the 401k plan was gone the next day. They found something else. But here's the distinction, right? You had mentioned if you're a 1099, you can't participate in the employer's plan. I say, great, we'll start one for you on your own. We'll set up a solo 401k, right? That's what I do for my clients. And we can have a very cost-effective plan that allows you to put in as much as possible for, a fraction of what your employer is probably paying for that full board plan.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Again, I think it's more like, are you going to take the time to figure it out?
Here's the distinction, and you're absolutely right. We talked about this in the previous episodes about how the current system is designed to create employees starting at the education level and, working them through a pipeline all the way through retirement, where the notion is, that whole Adam Smith model, specialize, focus on your little corner, do it well, go through all the check boxes, you'll have a pension at the end, and everything will be covered for you. And my personal stance on that is it's very inefficient to do it that way, because by giving up agency on all those different areas of your life, you're letting somebody else make those decisions that may be beneficial for the whole, but it may be horrible for you, and you may not even know it. And
without going down that path, because we had a whole conversation last time about this. I guess it's more like a chicken and the egg kind of question of like, do you think if there was an education system that taught that independence and that more entrepreneurial, self-directed mindset early? So let's say that does exist. Do you think there will be more people who will have the mindset of, I want to figure it out for myself? Or is there still a decent number of people like, my life is easier and I am happier with more structure in place?
I certainly think it's a former. Here's why. I think there was a sliver in time where that model of going through the check boxes in education, getting the W-2 job, staying in the same company for 30 years, getting that pension, and then, dying happily with, your 2-bedroom house and 2 kids in college and all of that made a lot of sense. I feel like the way society is set up now, a lot of that is just so hard to do. You don't stay in the same job for 30 years. You have to be entrepreneurial in your mindset, realizing that, frankly, the market rewards you for switching every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Also, there's a lot of things in your life that you are given agency to handle, where if you don't have that experience, it's not going to lead to great outcomes. I tell my clients, whether you like it or not, your household is a business, right? And you're managing your expenses and your income to create assets and build wealth, just like a business. If you don't have a clear understanding of how that works, you're giving up so much on the top end. So whether you like it or not, you're running a self-employment business, right? And by not understanding how taxes work, by not understanding how the financial system works, by giving agency away to all of these different areas in your life that are, in my opinion, pretty critical, you're giving up so much. And that begins with this understanding of, not being an employee, not having that employee mindset of having everything else figured out for you. So at the end of the day, I think by changing that focus, it would change a lot. Also, in one's personal life, you have to figure out things on your own. You have to figure out your own health and what works for you, and your own, mental health, physical health, financial health. If you leave that to your employer or some outside force, it may not get the light of day that it deserves. It may get the short end of the stick.
Okay, so the first thought comes to my mind, like, okay, gotta make sure I talk to my kids about this. That's like immediate first thought is like, gotta get that growth mindset going. And I've read about things. It's things like grit and stick-to-itiveness and that problem solving. And my wife and I talked about, like, okay, what's the next question that we're gonna ask? Like, so there's definitely something there. I agree with that. The second thought was, I think it was Peter Thiel was funding something like, I'll pay you $200 grand to not go to college or something like that if you try and start a business or something like that. He's saying, like, college applicants who are qualified enough to get in, but trying to, like, give them the money first. I think we had the conversation, like, if a private college costs $250, like, would you rather have $1 million to start a business or a 4-year degree from Harvard?
Mm-hmm.
That it's because I still don't know. I'm there's still like, I'm still thinking like networking effects kind of thing, but I'm more and more, I won't say on board, but like, Trishul keeps saying this one thing, like, he keeps making sense. The education, I can see that. I guess it's I know how nice it can be, like, if someone's taking care of something for, like having that structure, having to remove, like, I don't want to have to make every decision. And my wife and I talk about, like, there's like just a mental exhaustion at the end of the day, especially being parents, of answering so many questions from 3 kids who like literally they're asking a question while I'm answering the first one. The second one asks a question. I remember that question. I was answering the third one, asked the question. It's like, I'm now like have a mental queue of 4 questions in my head while I'm still answering the first one. And like that kind of thing just gets exhausting. Like, but those are like good traits that I want my kids to have. And so when it gets to the end of the day, it's like, what do you want for dinner? Like, I don't care if you choose, I'll make it. And neither of us wants to choose. We would both rather make dinner as long as we didn't have to decide what dinner was.
Right.
And so I think there's still some kind of opportunity for that in society.
Yeah, there must be, but I feel like it's such a double-edged sword. I feel like there's an idealization, right? That here's how it's supposed to work. But frankly, I think whether we like it or not, the world is going to force this change on everyone, right?
I think so too. I think the like current economic environment is like employers extracting value from employees.
Yeah.
And like that super old economic model that makes sense. Like the incentive for a company to hire an employee is if I can pay this employee $20 an hour, but the work they do as part of this organization provides $25 an hour of value, then like the company grows. And so the good employers will figure out, okay, if I can pay these two people $20 an hour and together they're producing $52 in like value, like there's this like synergy of their work.
Yeah.
The company grows and both employees are happy. The bad employers like, okay, if I can get $25, but I can pay this other person $19 per hour, I'm going to do that. It's a lot easier to like screw the employee than to figure out how to get those two working together well. And that's here's how environment we're in.
Here's how I personally see it. If you're looking for a job where you can slim under the radar and somehow get by with minimal effort and freelance on the side or something like that, W-2 seems like a good deal. Basically, you're getting more out of the company than they're getting from you. However,
okay, go ahead.
What I was going to say is, however, the way employment is set up in this country, we've discussed this many times. The employer is going to squeeze out as much as they possibly can on you, such that no matter how much the performance of the company increases, your wages adjusted for inflation will not go up.
Yeah. You should look at to F It, I Quit. It'll be like, you'll be entertained, it's hilarious, and you'll be angry. I think it's also like classic capitalism. Like any like buy and sell, like I'll sell this to you for $10. No, you'll buy it for $9.90. Okay, I'll sell it to you for $9.95. And like that, like we're both trying to like extract the value from each other in that negotiation. And that's kind of like what the market forces of employer and employee is. Like, I'll pay you this much, but I want this much. No, like there's negotiation there, but there's like both like, I'm going to give you as little time as I can to get your money. Again, for that, like that mindset example of like the employee trying to extract as much value from the company and the company trying to extract as much value from the employee. And again, so I think that's probably like, because like that's the misaligned incentives. Neither of them are trying to align that relationship to be for their both benefits. I think so. I think there's a lot of good examples where when those incentives are aligned, both work out. But there's too many people who I want all the reward for the work that these employees do, and sometimes it's just like stockholders. Stockholders don't necessarily care about like the like lunch in the lunchroom.
Yeah,
like they say, we're paying how much in lunch? Like that affects the stock price. And so I think there's something there, but this is just like, it sounds like classic capitalism.
It is. It is capitalism. And, frankly, this is the way the system is set up so that this balance will lead to wealth creation where the majority of it will go to the owners. That's just how capitalism works. employees can be incentivized by, like we said, becoming owners in some capacity, whether it's de minimis or not, that can help. But that's the way the system is set up. And, I think the trade-off of being an employee, just to sum things up a little bit, is you're basically giving up top end for security, right? You're giving up some of the pie for the feeling of being safe. Kind of like the reason why you might buy an insurance policy.
I think that's actually a good phrase, a very important distinction, because you're not necessarily giving up top end for security. You're giving up top end for the feeling of being safe.
Yes, that's a big notion there, right? It's that feeling, right? We know there's many cases where if you think about it in practice, the self-insurance route might be sensible. The last point I just want to make before we run to the end of the clock, Aaron and I are trying to race through a meeting while we're perpetually going over our time expounded time limit. But again, just that notion of, I think the world is changing to the point where it may not even make sense to have employees anymore, or being the employee, and following that mindset of, I'm going to follow the check boxes and hope things work out. We even mentioned the notion that the job market is changing so quickly that job you go to school for may not exist by the time you graduate. So you need to have some sort of mindset of being able to adjust to do what's best for your situation, rather than letting that be decided in advance or by some other agent beside yourself.
And I actually do think like Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, is going to be one of those like time and history decisions where, by unlinking health insurance from your employer, I think that's going to be one of those little catalysts that will have big ripple effects over generations. Because we saw the exact opposite happen during World War II. We've talked about that history. Like, that's when they started being linked together. And so that's been it did not exist in the 1930s. It's just like the 1950s till now, until the mid 2010s. And so I think that we're going to see, that's going to be one of those things. So, okay. This is good. I like it. My last one thing. I still feel like right now, I'm not trying to teach my kids to upset the system. I'm trying to teach them to play the game, if that makes sense.
What do you mean by upset the system?
They're still going to go to college, but I'm going to be, they're still going to go to college, but I'm going to make sure to teach them how to invest in real estate, save early, like extract everything you can from your employer, negotiate this. Like, I'm going to make sure that they understand the game well enough to own a variety of assets.
My optimistic end note is, I think all this means is there's ripe room for disruption, meaning I hope we don't need college anymore. I hope that kids can find a way to learn far better than they ever would with the technologies that we're creating on an individualized basis, such that they're learning better than they would at the best university on the planet for nothing. And for healthcare, I'm hoping that there's similar disruptions there, that any human can get, great medical advice for pennies on the dollar, unless it's some super cutting edge therapy. But standard medicine, I think could come down in price by leveraging all of these enhancements in technology. So, I in my mind, after energy prices, which I mentioned before, should come down on the chopping block, I think these two could as well, which would change the whole game here that we're talking about.
Okay. This, as always, great conversation. Lots of fun. Only went 4 minutes over the hour.
Right. All right. Good stuff, Aaron. I enjoyed the conversation as well. If you're enjoying these, do like, subscribe, share, listen, and we'll see you later. Thanks, everybody, for listening and watching.
Bye.
Bye.